So it's interesting that Backwoods, you said that you were throwing down the gauntlet, and I'm guessing that you're referring to how militant Star Wars people, passionate Star Wars people can be about their favorite thing. Because like spoiled children, almost, these nerds are like, well, actually, you cannot, of course, play with the AT, like, you can't expect a AT, and an ST to launch against the Millennial Falcon. Something along those lines. The thing I find interesting with The Mandalorian, and I'm not sure if how into the details of it you are, it's one person, as far as the director and producer, that makes a difference on that program. That's Jon Favreau. And he was the chubby guy, Happy, from the first newer Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. He was kind of his finisher, his fixer. And I remember Jon Favreau, first I had ever seen him, he was playing the sidekick kind of protagonist in this movie called Singles with, what's that other guy's name? That tall, conservative guy. It'll come to me while I'm talking about it, but I appreciated his work, and I identified with him in that movie as a younger person. What it was these two struggling actor/comedians, and they were in Los Angeles. Vince Vaughn is the other guy. So anyway, I identified with Jon Favreau's character because he was going through a breakup, and I myself at the same time was having a hard time getting over a girl. So I identified with that movie quite a bit, watched it with a friend, and there's a famous line from that movie, like, baby all grows up, as Vince Vaughn freaks out and he's jumping up and down on the table, and he's like, baby all grows up. And my buddy Tim used that same line on me when it seemed like I had finally gotten over her and moved on with my life, similar to that character. But as a result, there was a connection that I established in my mind between him and me. I mean, he doesn't know me from shit, but his humanity and how he approaches storytelling, friends along the lines of Kevin Smith, which Kevin Smith, he's a good guy with amazing storytelling ability, but he skirts that line with the establishment. He skirts it between getting a production done and kowtowing to the woke. And maybe he sees the point of the woke people. I do not know. However, Jon Favreau pushing The Mandalorian. Now baby's really all grows up. And hang on, I gotta kind of get rolling. This truck's kind of loud. And The Mandalorian comes out of nowhere, out of what a lot of the fanboys or fan people would say would be the dismal failure of the sequel trilogy starring Rey. Not to be confused with our Rachel, but different Rey, where you had directors just running amok. But that is my point. What makes the sequel trilogy fail has to do with Disney, or whomever was in charge of it. I think it's Kathleen Kennedy, throwing money and big names at a situation to just get bigger investment. So you take episode 7 and you get that big high-powered actor, and now China's willing to invest in the project. Everybody's excited about the project, but then you make the next movie, bring in a different director, trying to do what George Lucas did as far as different directors, but George Lucas had a different reason for that. He didn't do it intentionally. So it ends up falling flat, and then you get a second director that he's all about subverting expectations. You give the layup to the second director, and instead of Luke Skywalker getting back that lightsaber, he tosses it over his shoulder. They show a X-Wing starfighter down in the water. They never go back to it. It's a bizarre situation that really pulled the next level nerds out of it. And in the case of Reward Audacity, so far as, and for some other people, I'm sure, it's one more thing that defined our childhood is now gone. But you can't get the original version of episodes 4, 5, and 6, which again, we're not even going to touch on how nerdy it is to make the first movie episode 4. It's very nerdy. You know, it gives your audience that nerd feeling of, I know something you don't know. But then they go on to violate these same rules that they made just for whatever purpose other than to get things done. Literally the Dungeons and Dragons rule of cool. Now, the rule of cool works in Dungeons and Dragons, according to my daughter, because as the dungeon master, you're trying to give your play group just an awesome experience. Say you have a character in Dungeons and Dragons that's supposed to be immune to poison. Well, no matter what. Well, in Rule of Cool overrides your character's immunity to poison. There's just some sort of magic that wasn't anticipated, and now you have poison. So, Rule of Cool, fuel is a limited supply, and a starfighter can't be tracked while it's in hyperspace, but it can be tracked while it's in hyperspace. Meanwhile, that takes away all like the previous canon. Like, these nerds make all these dictionaries and all these definitions, and to the point of, we'll go back to the Millennium Falcon, somebody's made a dictionary over how that engine runs, and George Lucas like, yeah, that's how it works. That's my George Lucas impression, in case you didn't know. He has that squeaky, nerdy voice. And the new movies violated that. Now, did Jon Favreau go back to what works for Star Wars? No, not really. Other than he kept Star Wars in a literary framework, which they didn't have during the sequel trilogies. Literary framework, as you've observed, it's a Wild West kind of scenario, and it works because there's story continuity and there's underpinnings that give it structure. You can't just constantly subvert expectations in storytelling and have a lasting story. You show the sword on the wall, and that sword needs to come into play. Good example would be in episode 4, as you call it backwoods, when Obi-Wan Kenobi gives Luke the lightsaber. That lightsaber is used later on in the story. And in episode 7 with Rey, when they go to the lady with the asshole eyes, she got assholes for eyes, they ask, well, how'd you get this lightsaber, which is the same lightsaber from episode 4? And she's like, that is a good story for another time. And it never came to be. It's just sort of moved on. Like the story falls flat because you don't hit the points of keeping your promise to your audience. And that's the difference between subverting expectations and what they manage to do. The whole first video, and Rey wants to bring him the saber and be trained. And there was so much that could have been done. If they would have, as much as everybody complained about episode 7 being a mirror of episode 4, if they made episode 8 a mirror of episode 5, which some say that Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie, which is episode 5, then I think everybody would have accepted it. They could have sprinkled in a little bit of what happened before, but just make everything an echo and a love letter to the fans with a little bit more. Even make it a little bit inclusive. You want a couple of girl Ewoks kissing at the end? Have them girl Ewoks kissing at the end. Anything goes. It's Endor. Could have been done. And, you know, as a result from that, and then Solo falling flat, now you got episodic series and everything's going backwards. Jon Favreau, and whoever his director of photography is, that you mentioned them not using CGI. Well, I beg to differ. They use these screens that are ultra high definition LCD screens, and they can make a movie background, essentially layering a digital image from the image that they're creating, and there's no difference between the ultra high definition backdrop that moves versus what's on it, versus it being artificially added later that you can tell the difference. That's how they managed to do it, making Mandalorian really innovative. Now the real question is, how could they do so good, so good with the Mandalorian, but yet the Book of Boba Fett landed flat as a fucking pancake? I don't care what you say. That could have, most almost good I've ever seen. And that, my friends, is why Snedmeister doesn't even know when to start. And I'm not even an ultra Star Wars fan. I'm just a Star Wars fan. What a nightmare, huh? All right. Catch y'all later. Good looking out. And, Shafe, need to hear your words on the Star Wars, my man. I know you got this. I know you got this. And I know you got the time on your hands. All right. Take it sleazy, everybody.